The happy, what? The happy bird painting dance?
It.
This is happy day.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know if you would see that again now.
Now, we're gonna go back in. What I wanna do is we're gonna finish up the water, and then we're gonna go back in and we're gonna add in the highlights in the water. And then the last step we'll do is we'll go back in and put the bird in. And he's pretty easy, believe it or not. So what I want you to do is I want you to come back in, and I'm only gonna do a small portion of this. We're gonna come back in, mix up some really dark paint. Thank you, Linda. Your burnt sienna and your ultramarine blue. And a decent sized brush. You don't want to use a number 4 on this, at least use a number 8. And then I want you to come back and now remember, this is water. And so what I want you to notice is we want to have a little bit of a squiggle. Oop, get some of that excess off my brush. And we're going to actually, you know how waves will actually, or the ripples will actually cause, you'll see the ripple. What I'm trying to show is the ripples in the water, if that makes sense. Now, kind of keep an eye. If you have one that is angling over to the side, then you want to angle to the side as well. And then I also want you to notice that I'm trying to go in. You notice where I tried to leave my ripples and leave the spaces? I'm going to try to kind of match those up. If I don't do it, I'm not going to worry about it. And then the shorter ones, of course, are going to have much shorter ripples. You can just kind of refer to your, oh yeah, look at how that starts to settle that down. Now, if you haven't done your bird, the same thing with your bird. You're going to start right where his foot or his leg, it goes into the water. And then just kind of come back in. Notice that one leg is a little bit behind the other. The one that is farthest away is a little bit higher. Do you see that? And then if some of you need to make your shadow of your bird a little bit darker, I can help you do that. So we're going to do the same thing over on this side. And notice, especially as it comes down, I probably should have left a little bit more sparseness. But like as it comes down, you could actually start leaving more space between. Don't do it like I did it. It's fine. Leave more space, but you know, look at your reference. You see how it's darkest and it tends to be really, really thick. And then as it's coming down, we can let it go farther apart. And that looks more realistic, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to do that. Then the next thing we're going to do, I've got lots of white if you need some white. We're going to come back in here with our white and a little bit of yellow. Now remember, all your color underneath is going to come through, right?
Which white is that?
This happens to be titanium white gouache. Gouache is a little bit more opaque covering. Okay. If you don't have that, you can certainly borrow some of mine. So we'll come back in here. Got a little red in there, but that's okay. And the first thing that we wanted to notice where your sun is. We're going to do this section here first. We'll hold off on that area up at the top. So come on back in. That needs to have more white in it. I can see that right now. Now you're probably going to have to continue to, I don't like that. I'm wondering if I switch to cadmium yellow when I want to get that bright orange color. Oh, that's a little bit better. So what I want you to do for now is just put your white on here in between where your shadows are. Now, what I have found is that if I wait, I'll put the white on, let it dry, and then I can go back in after it's dry and be able to soften up those edges without pulling the paint up off the paper. So see, you notice I've really mixed up a lot of paint so that I can continually fill up my brush. If it's drying and it's just going pale on you, means you don't have enough paint mixed up. And then some of these I'll kind of have get smaller again. Notice how some of them kind of start edging over a little bit this way. I got to mix up more paint. So if you'll notice, I'm kind of mixing up more yellow than I am white. And I can kind of do that with this gouache. Trying not to dry brush, which is why I'm adding a little bit more. And I won't continue going. You all get the general idea with that. Now the other thing that I'm going to do, I think, and I'm going to leave this up to you all. You can do this or not. But maybe kind of coming back in. No, I don't think I want to do that. Forget I said that. I was debating going back in with a little bit of yellow and white out here, but see, that's more in shadow. We're trying to show that intense sun. So what I'm going to do, now that this is pretty much dry, is I'm going to go back in with a fairly dry brush. Notice I just rinsed it out, got most of the water out, and then I'm just coming back in and starting right inside and just smoothing out those edges. So I'm not trying, I don't want to pick up the paint in the middle because I want that to stay really pretty and bright. But I'm just trying, oh, look at how pretty that looks. But it works so much better when you let it dry a little bit.
Patience, grasshopper. That's a minute.
Now the other thing I will tell you, when this dries, if we decide we want to have it a little bit brighter yellow, we'll just go in with a pale wash of yellow and a tiny bit of water on top of that, but very transparently. Okay, everybody got the general idea with that? Yes. I won't continue going. Now, it's not quite dry yet, but let me just give you an idea of what happens when I go back with just yellow and a little bit of water, clean off my brush a little bit. Oh, look at that. But go over the whole thing. It's almost dry brush. I can't emphasize that enough because you're not trying, you have too much water in there in your brush, it's going to mute out your color. So that's what you're going to wind up with. So I'm going to ask you all to do the shadows, and I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put your light in through here. Then the last thing we're going to do is come back and finish this area up and start the bird. The bird demo is going to be very short. Sometimes, oh, thank you, honey. Sometimes, depending on how thick the biscuit was put on, and sometimes even, it looks to me like it just maybe wasn't thick enough in some areas. But like if you wanted to go back, there's a couple of things you can do. We're going to go back and try the X-Acto blade. You could also try an electric.
I'm sorry.
You could,
I don't have the video.
No, you could also do it with an electric eraser or
She
both.
can't hear. We can't
Who?
hear you.
We're just trying to listen to you.
Oh, Charlie, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do a demo, y'all. Sorry about that. So what you have to remember when you're doing this, notice how flat I'm using the blade. Don't want to use it like this and poke a hole. And the other thing I'm doing is going back and forth so that I don't dig a chunk out of the paper.
I'm good at that.
And if anybody needs help with this, I'll be happy to do it. What I can typically do is get enough of this out where I can then just go back in with an electric eraser. Now we can always, of course, use white paint in the middle. Or you can always have more white rays going across your sun. I mean, there's all kind of ways to fix it. It's just not that big of a deal. Nobody's going to be looking at the reference photo. So I wanted to show you that, Linda. I'll help you finish that later. All right, so the first thing I want you to do is I want you to look at the black and white of your bird. This is the black and white. He's in silhouette. So this is going to be the color of our bird. We don't have to put a middle tone in. This is going to be the middle tone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm...
Mine's dark.
We'll take a look at it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in. First thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna go in, you know, if you've ever looked at it, this is, by the way, a heron. Look at all the burnt sienna in here. Can you see the burnt sienna in your reference photo? Lots of burnt sienna. So we're gonna come in with a little bit of burnt sienna, kind of transparently. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in, look at my reference, and so I'm gonna see the burnt sienna here. Now mix it, notice I mixed it really dilutely because I want it transparent, but I also have kind of taken the excess water off of my brush so that I can get a nice detailed line. And I'm gonna see maybe a little bit there. And then what I'll do is just rinse my brush out, dry it off, just fade that out. Then I'm gonna come down into this area and I'm gonna see this start up in through here. Kind of come on around down through here. Now I put this on very, very lightly my first time and then kind of came back in and darkened up some of the areas a little bit. Some of this comes down just a little farther. And then what I'm gonna do is, I'm seeing a little bit in through his wings right here. So I'm gonna start in his wings. Now, we're gonna go back in and add a little bit of white in through here. So don't worry about trying to do individual feathers. That's kind of a waste of time. And then that kind of comes on up through here.
It's just kind of like foggy.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I love this though, you know.
And then I see a little bit up in through here.
What?
You're not gonna scrape this.
Yeah, 'cause I gotta.
I may even stick a little bit along here. He'll never know.
Yeah, I know.
Turn into like batik and stuff like that.
Now I can already see on some of these areas, I'm gonna wanna come back when it's dry and maybe add a little bit more color. I see a little bit of color down in here.
Do you dream in color?
Itchy nose. And I may even come back. Oh yeah, that's pretty. See, now that I've got my initial layer on, I can see that I need to go back in and make some of those areas darker, and it really starts to give him form. All right. And then we're gonna go back in and I'm gonna use, I'm just mixing up Dirty Palette. This is a dark gray. And what I'm gonna do is, now this is when you wanna definitely use your detail brush. No, I'm not gonna do that. We're gonna do just the body. I want the body to be a darker gray than what I have. Can you see that color in through here? That color? That's what we wanna put in, not a black, just a little bit darker gray. I'm not gonna do the feathers just yet. Just gonna kind of do the body. Hey y'all, can you take it outside? I'm sorry. I'm trying to video this and so this whole body is going to get covered in. Just kind of go with where you think the body is right there, because the body doesn't really have a line to it. It's lots and lots and lots of feathers. Now I'm going over all of the light colored feathers because we're going to go back in with white, paint them back in again. Now, while that's drying, I'm gonna go back up in the head and I wanna go with my black and I'm just gonna kind of come back in. Look at how that starts to pop against that background. Isn't that beautiful? Just go over his whole eye at this point because we'll put the white back in. And then I'm gonna come down and I'm gonna start working on these areas that are just literally solid black. have a little bit of this black kind of down here. Notice how black this is, and see the little bit of reflected light there? We're gonna leave that when we go back in and put our darks in on the body. Just gonna blend that out just a little bit. And then I'll come back in. And again, you just wanna make sure your paint is dark enough. Here's one leg. That goes down to his really knobby knee. I'm not gonna do the other leg. I think you guys can figure out how to do that. But we'll come on down to our shadow. He's starting to look like a bird. All right, now I'm gonna come back in on the top, and I want to have a little bit of this really dark again along this line here. Now when that dries, I'm going to kind of feather that out a little bit. Now we're going to go back in, and again, dark paint. Get your, if you kind of tap off your brush if you need to, and we're going to start kind of showing some of these little feathers that come down. And over here, I'm not going to make them super black. Actually, you know what? This part of his body needs to be a little bit darker like this is. So I'm going to come back in and just on his body here. You can just kind of look at it and gauge what colors you need to be. But see, this kind of gives him a little bit more shape in his neck, doesn't it? Having that little bit darker gray in through there. Now I'll go ahead while I'm at it and put that darker gray. These feathers are fairly close together. Notice they're really not black, are they? Boy, this is a quiet group today. Are y'all petrified or what? Mm-hmm. Now, see, now this is when, and I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but see, that's when, now that I'm putting this darker color in, I'm looking at this going, that's not dark enough. So I'm going to come back in, and you could even dry brush. Look at the color on that. Oh my. Use your pat-pat technique. And maybe even a little bit up in through here at that very bottom. You know what? I got it. Linda, can I borrow you guys? This is killing my back. I gotta sit.
Yeah.
All right, now, same gray color. Now that this is fairly dry, I'm gonna come on back in, and I wanna kind of just show, that's a little thick, but that's okay. Notice that the body does this. Notice that the feathers do the same thing. They kind of come up a little bit higher. They follow, the end of this follows the shape of the body. Now, if you need to, I'm going to make these a little bit thicker because I can always go back with a little bit of white, pop a little color in there. Would you guys like me to stop here and do this much, or you want me to continue on? What would you like? Hey, what would you like?
I think stop and let us catch up.
Okay, then let's do that. We're gonna come back in, and you can almost look at mine and see what colors to use. I'm gonna come back in and make this beak a little bit of a gray color. Now we're gonna come back over that with a little bit of white at the top, so no worries. A little bit of gray there. Ooh, that stands out right there. Now, I think it's kind of fun. You could literally get lost. Where's Pam? She must have gone to the bathroom.
She must have gone.
But like I came back in and see, I made a little bit of this a little bit darker. We're gonna put that white up in through there. That's gonna look really pretty. And then I'm also gonna come back in, and I may even put a little bit of this dab dab coming down into the neck. Now, I want you to notice there's a little bit of a shadow right here where his beak comes up and hits his eye. Look at that shadow that comes down this way, a little bit darker. So where that comes up to his eye, that's gonna kind of come around, and you just go right with his neck. Now what I'm gonna do is fade that just a little bit. And then listen, make this your heron. You could, like if you decided that you wanted to have this a little bit stronger, you could do that. You could make it stronger in through here, etc., etc. Now, what I'm gonna do, I like the way that this looks. What I will do, just to show you all, is you kind of see some of the feathers coming up into the neck. So what I'll do is some of these feathers that I put in, I'm just gonna come in with a fairly dry brush and just kind of let them come up and in with his neck, just to blend them a little bit better. Now I'm gonna mix up some black. Oh, come on. Trying to get enough brown. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in, I want you to notice, a lot of this you're gonna come back in and you're gonna put in with white. But I want you to notice that that body comes around and that black goes all the way down his body. It gets skinnier and skinnier till it meets up there. And then I'm just for now gonna make that go all the way like that. And then what I'll do is come back in with a fairly damp brush and just fade this out. I had more fun with the bird than I did with anything else on the painting. Ooh, that looks good. Now I'm gonna come back and notice that it's really dark along here. And then what happens is I come down the body, is it starts to sort of fade. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in and leave this alone, but here I'm gonna go in with my little dab dab technique and let that start blending into the gray. And I'll probably come back and do that again. And then if you'll notice, you almost have like little ledges. So here's a darker area. If you look at it, you got this area that comes like this. And as it comes out this way, it starts feathering out with the feathers. Can you kind of see that? It's almost like a hump. And there's a line of feathers. Now I'm gonna come back in, put a little darker color in through here. I'm gonna come on down in through here, and I'm gonna start making all of this dark. Now this is dry enough for me to be able to do this. I'm gonna come back in and put more of that darker gray on there. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go right through here. See a little bit of a shadow right there. So you just kind of keep adding. And then just fade this out a little bit. But you see how those feathers are a little bit darker, then as they come over, I may actually add a little bit more of this gray right next to the feather. In fact, I think I'm gonna make my feathers just a little bit darker, period. And I'll show you why. Whether you wanna see it or not, I'm gonna show you why. See how this little bitty stuff like this starts to really give him interest? I mean, you can see these little feathers kind of come up. Look at how that just, somebody answer.
Yes.
We're on video, somebody answer like there's interest. I'm teasing y'all. I know you're all intent. Everybody's scared of this poor heron.
Mine looks pregnant.
Well, Pam, maybe it is.
Put a little nest off to the side and some eggs in it.
It's too poochy, too brown.
All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna come on down, and I know this looks dark, but just bear with me. Fill all this in. And notice you've got this area of his tail feathers that does this. And then watch what's gonna happen. It gets more of a gray tone along here and at the bottom. So I'm gonna kind of cover that in. And then at the very bottom, I'll come on back in and just pat that line, soften that. I want that to be a gray for a kind of a reflected light, because I'm going to come underneath here and make these tail feathers really, really dark. Remember that little bit of reflected light right there? So again, just kind of softening up that line over there. He's starting to look like a bird. All right, a little bit more black paint. Almost done, folks. All right. Come on, Brown, let's go. There we go. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go back in, and I find it helpful to pull the paper toward me. I'm gonna come back in, and notice I always kind of twirl my brush a little bit so I get that really nice point. And now what I'm gonna do is just start putting in the feathers. Now don't worry if you don't get it looking exactly like that. That's not the point. Make him look like a bird.
Thank goodness.
But you know, they have all those feathers, now a little thicker on some of these and getting thinner as they come out. But just kind of drag your brush towards you. And then I may even, oh, he looks pretty good.
He's pretty.
All right, so, yeah, but you all are not allowed to outdo me. Now,
Well,
I'm gonna go
she's
back in through
pregnant,
here,
so-
and some of these, I feel like I could have a little definition on. So I'm gonna go back in on some of these and maybe have a little bit more of that black coming up into here. All right. Now, the last thing we're gonna do, and I could continue working on this, but, you know, you all, I think, get the point. What I want to do is use my white and come back in and start adding in some of the highlights. So for instance, on the head, I'm going to come back in here. Put this over here where I can see it a little bit better. Look at everywhere you see a little lighter area, and that's where I find the black and white really helps you. So I've got a little, ooh, hello. Have a little bit of this white. Alice, why don't you come stand over here? You might be able to see better. And again, I really find it's easier to let this dry and then come back in and soften it if you need to. Now, you notice again on here, there's like this little bit of lighter feathers that go right along here. Now, I know I put this on fairly pure paint, but I want you to notice how it's drying lighter already. So that's okay, because you don't want this to be a bright light, except maybe the eyeball itself. So I'm gonna put that little bit of white there. I think I'm gonna come around here, and there's a little bit of this white that goes around his neck. And it kind of comes down towards where that first feather starts. And make it a little bit thicker, because when I go to soften it, I'm going to lose some of that. Notice the little bit of lighter color right in through here. Right next to that black. And then I may even have a little bit that I put in through here. You can see it right up in through this area. See how much lighter that's drying already? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna put your white on. I'm gonna go around my little bit of dark there. You're gonna put your white on, and then you're probably gonna have to go back in and lighten up some areas. A little bit of that on the far side of the, I'm just gonna blend this, show you a few of these feathers over here, and then I'll let you guys, oh, I almost don't even wanna do anything with that. But I am gonna soften up the edges, just a bit. And if it's too bright, like this was, then I can just go in, pull it out, take some of it up, and it'll dry pretty much the tone I want it to. And see, I'll just soften those edges. Now you could even go through and kind of pull this to look like feathers. This I want to soften just a little bit, but around the eye I don't. Ooh, that looks good. Just softening edges. And again, I'm gonna kind of stop. I think you all get the drift on that. The last thing we're gonna do, and again, we don't need to worry about having this super bright, but I am gonna mix up a fairly pure amount of this color because I want these feathers to dry this color right here. So, and again, please don't feel like my feathers don't look exactly like the ones on the bird. Nobody's gonna be looking at the bird. So we're gonna come in, and really what we're seeing is just the ends of the tail feathers. So like we'll have that showing there, and then I'm gonna have another one showing that's kind of angled this direction. I'm gonna have these little ones kind of coming down. Like it's lighter here, kind of fades out. And then notice how they sort of, ooh, that was a perfect one. Every once in a while you get lucky. Tell you what, this is a quiet group today. And then you kind of have, now some of this it's gonna dry lighter. If it doesn't, we'll come back in and tone it down just a little bit. Notice some of your little feathers up and through here. Just for interest, and then even through here, there's these little small ones that do this. And then if you need to, go back in, and I just want this to sort of disappear up into the black, so I'll just let it disappear. Same thing here. You know, what do you do if you get too much white on there? Cover it with black. Everybody got the general idea? Mm-hmm. See, that's a little bit too big. I'll go back in and put some black on that. Now, the only other thing I want to show you is you can even come in with a little bit more diluted white, and you'll kind of see some of these gray feathers right in through here. So we'll kind of come in and maybe just add a little detail in through here. Trying to get him skinny. And again, I'm gonna go with his neck, kind of making some of these. And then you could even get really down and dirty and come back in and do some dotting in through here. And then if you look at your bird, the only place to me that it needs more pop is like right here where it's hitting along.
Yeah.
And maybe just a couple of these feathers if you felt like you needed to have a tiny bit more bright. There's just a couple of them, it's not a lot. Kind of like just the ends. Everybody okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, go have some fun, finish up your bird. Like on this one, we'll come back in, and I think what we're gonna do is there's two ways you can work this. we're gonna come back in on Linda's, and it's because hers is fairly light, I think what we're gonna do is just come back in here with this pretty orange. Ugh. So much for pretty, huh? Mostly yellow, little bit of red. And I'll take a look at it. Whatever you do, make sure you bring these back in and let me help you finish them or critique them if we need to. But like on Linda's, what we could do is come back in. Linda, how's that color for you? A little brighter?
Yeah, it looks kind of peachy to me a little.
Well, unfortunately, when you add the white to the,
Oh, I see. Well, it is. I see where you are.
it's back
Yeah,
here.
I see where
So
you are.
what happened is that, and I didn't realize this when I did mine, is that you're seeing this color, and it kind of, it's like it going around a curve. So you can kind of come back in and just add some of that in, and we'll let that dry. We'll let that dry, and then we'll come back with some orange. Now, like Eleanor's is really nice and orange already. So really all we're trying to do here is to maybe come back in. I'm just gonna go with yellow and white on yours. And mine's probably gonna be the same thing. Now remember, mostly yellow, a little bit of white. And really what we wanna do is kind of come back in here. Now we're not gonna do this exactly like what you see here. What I'm gonna try to do is to go back in and just show some of these highlighted areas. And I'm gonna kind of put them at the same, kind of underneath the sun again. Now what the other thing I can do is kind of come back in. Here's my dirty palette. And I can come back in and kind of mix the same color as this gray. Oop, I must have some white in there. I want to mix about the same color gray I have. Tap off my brush a little bit. Just a little bit to kind of blend that in. Can do a little down here if we need to, and then a little bit over on this side. Notice how much farther this dark comes over on this side. I still got a little white in there. You see how, like right by the heron, there's a lot more of that gray that shows. So just mix a color that's fairly close to your heron.
Having your kids that grow up in Catholic places where they don't serve meat on Fridays, but we lived in
Okay, I see what.
And then we are going to bring some of that gray and just periodically. Now this is when, I love this 1/2-inch brush. You can just literally tap it. We want to show a few of those darker areas in there. And I may want to actually have this come up a little higher and blend into where those lights are. Now, I'm going to also tell you, if everything else fails, I use pastel pencil on mine. So if you want to go back in with pastel, like an orange pastel pencil, you can do that as well. And then I'll go back in. And again, with those little lines that you made, if you wanted to go back in and soften those after you put them on, you can do that. I think the whole goal here is just to sort of break it up and give it color. See the tap tap? And then actually, I may take some of that yellow and let it blend up into the blue. Ooh, that looks realistic, doesn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, man. And again, I can always go back in with my, I can always go back in with my, water and a little, on the brush if I needed to kind of soften up lines. But that's really all we need to do on that, okay? That was a lot, that's honestly the last part, but we forgot it.